So today we'll quickly go over who we are, but also we'll more importantly dive into why measure. What are we talking about? How do our teams across threat detection, incident response, cyber threat intel collaborate and utilize the MITRE framework? What are some of the pitfalls that we've seen, and where are we off to next? So obviously, yeah, we just received the introductions on who we are. I look after cyber threat intelligence, threat detection, threat hunting, and incident response at Canva. So it's a very large group over around the world, and we protect over 185 million customers. Yeah, next slides.
So my name's Jasmina. Fun fact about me, I wasn't always a cybersecurity practitioner. So I started out in digital illustration and games development, and then decided that I wanted a more secure career, pun intended. So yeah, I head up CTI at Canva, and that's me.
So one of the huge things that we've noticed is that if you're not measuring your threat detection coverage, it's pretty hard to understand where you actually are. Where does the investment need to go? What does good or great security look like? And what should we invest in? We have a very large team now, and obviously we need to prioritize what we need to work on. I'd love to be able to say, hey, we've got 100% coverage for absolutely everything, but everyone knows that's never feasible. So we need to prioritize and understand where we are today and what does our journey over the next 6-12 months look like. And that's based on measuring our threat detection coverage and our ability to understand and derive what coverage we can actually get from the log sources that we have, because obviously that will require additional engineering work if we need more log sources. So measuring is absolutely crucial and important for us to understand where we are today and build up our roadmap for the future. So some of the key things that we look at with detection questions and kind of with this measurement is, how has our protections in AWS improved? What is our coverage for the latest adversary hopping kangaroo? What does our CTI team tell us about that? And can we detect identity-based attacks? Now, that last question, hopefully with the version 16 of MITRE ATT&CK, will start to be a lot easier to measure based on the roadmap. But definitely, those initial kind of questions can be very challenging with MITRE ATT&CK as you use it today. A lot of organizations, as we'll go through, use the MITRE ATT&CK as an overlay for everything. But that starts to create some unique challenges, as we'll see.
Cool. So I'll be kind of talking about how CTI and our detections team actually collaborate using MITRE to, measure the threats that we see, but also actually do something with that information. So from the CTI side of things, obviously our whole job is to understand our adversaries, track their TTPs, and some of the ways that we do this at Canva is we'll create adversary profiles for the adversaries that we care about, as well as release threat bulletins about those adversaries of concern. And in those threat bulletins, we actually must map their TTPs to the MITRE ATT&CK framework. And as you all know, that allows us to have, use a common language to describe what it is that we're looking for and what it is that they're doing. Part of this activity also involves advising the detection and threat hunting team through the creation of threat hunting packages. So whilst we have adversary profiles and threat bulletins, a threat hunting package is really like a hypothesis or like a springboard to get them started on what they might want to look at. And the outcome of that, as we all know, might be a new detection. It might be we don't find anything, or it might be, hey, we've realized we don't actually have the logs to be able to detect this if we wanted to. Aha, down is forward. So from the detection side of things, I'll speak on behalf of my colleagues in that team, but they're really looking at, okay, how do we turn these TTPs into actual detections? What log sources do we need to be able to do that? If you joined the workshop yesterday, that's kind of a good insight into how that's all done. And also, how can we overlay our coverage with the adversary and understand the gaps? So we're really looking at mapping what coverage we have, mapping, it could be a campaign, it could be a specific adversary, or it could be just everything across the board, but kind of using those visualizations to try to communicate, hey, where are the gaps and what are we missing? Pass it over to you.
Thank you. And so some of the examples that we have around this is like, okay, adversary uses technique X. How do we detect that behavior? How can we simulate it? What do the analytics look like? But some of the challenge that we've started to see around this is, okay, on our MITRE ATT&CK navigator, we're green, bright green. We've got all the absolute detections across the organizations for this technique. But what does it actually look like in Okta? What does it actually look like in AWS? And once you start to kind of move down and look at a much more fine-grained level, we typically see that, and that's where things fall down. Some of the other challenges that we've seen with MITRE ATT&CK is, what is a platform versus a service? If you look at the MITRE ATT&CK Navigator today, Office 365 is a platform, but IIS or AWS or Azure is under the IIS banner. So there's a very large mixture of services and platforms, and there's no kind of clear-cut definition there. Also, the analytics and attacks that adversaries perform across service providers, across platforms, varies very largely. So how somebody would compromise Azure AD could vary quite differently from Okta. And so we're having a lot of challenges mapping how we're seeing adversaries shift into a born-in-the-cloud organization such as ourselves versus a much more traditional enterprise where most of MITRE is based on. We're also starting to see challenges on like, how do we measure the coverage for those? And how do we try and get measuring coverage for generic platforms, such as IAA and things like that? So there's all kinds of interesting challenges that we're facing there today.
Yeah, I'll talk about some of the human factors as well that kind of play into these challenges. One of these is pretty simple. It's tagging detections with certain techniques. I'm sure you all understand that techniques are kind of down to human interpretation. I know that we could try our best to turn it into a science, but at the end of the day, it is, human-based language that we all need to interpret and understand. So it's getting people to actually do it, and it's getting people to do it in a common and consistent way. Similarly, when you're talking about what coverage a detection provides, how do you actually know like the level of coverage? Maybe you can just have a binary yes, no, we have visibility, we don't, but there's always edge cases, right? And then from the CTI side of things, when people are actually mapping adversaries, writing reports and things like that, as I mentioned, different people will select different techniques based on interpretation. And the last one is a big thing that bothers me. Different tooling has different MITRE ATT&CK versions inbuilt into it. So your tip might have a different, plugin than your SIEM platform and things like that. And I find that very annoying.
Whilst obviously we stood up here talking about a lot of the challenges and pitfalls that we've seen, solutions talk a lot louder than problems. So one of the key things that we've done is started to shift to automate Navigator layer creation. And so rather than trying to use MITRE's platforms or services offering, we're actually doing that pair log source now. So we've created an automated system where on a regular basis, we actually pull down all of the threat detection rules that we've created. Each of them, as they're created, have to be tagged with MITRE techniques. So we then automatically create unique layers per every log source. This has really helped us understand on a much more fine-grained level, what does our true coverage look like? If you look at our overall threat detection coverage, it's very green, it looks incredibly healthy, and we should detect a lot of things. But then when you start diving into specific log sources, it starts to highlight specific opportunities for growth and specific things that we should focus on. And this is where the threat bulletins from the CTI team come in very, very crucially, because it then highlights, hey, this adversary is doing these things against Okta specifically, and it turns out we might not have that coverage. So if you'd looked at the overall MITRE technique that your SIEM will give you, everything's green, but we have to really dive into these log source coverage maps. The other really important thing that we've started to do is start automating testing. So we've created an in-house platform that will automatically test all of our threat detection rules, especially our high criticality ones. And it doesn't do that by replaying the logs or anything else. We actually execute malicious activities in our platforms. So we built integrations with AWS, with Okta, all of those crucial platforms for us. And we describe what the threat detection rule is looking for. We perform that action, and then we do that hourly. We do that to see a couple of things. First of all, does the detection logic make sense? We obviously look at MITRE techniques, the procedures written there as well to create these tests. But are the logs changing? So often you'll find that your a SaaS service provider or AWS or Google, things like that, will silently change a log type on you, or something in your log ingest pipeline will change. And then you'll never know that that's changed because the rule never fires, but hopefully your rules don't fire that often. So all of a sudden you're missing detections. And also we need to test, has the rest of the alert flow changed? We're a very dynamic environment. We're constantly updating how we alert the incident response teams. We're constantly creating new alert types and automated processes for triaging those. So we need to make sure that everything still works. So we do that on an hourly basis.
I think I talked a little bit about the threat bulletins resulting in actions and how, mapping to MITREs and matters techniques and things like that allows us to inform threat detections. One thing that we are looking at doing at the moment is using NLP tools to speed up identification of techniques in text.
And so some of the key kind of outcomes that we've had from our journey, and what we really recommend everyone kind of starts to think about, is really get a deeper understanding per system, per platform that you have out there. What does the true coverage look like? Today it's very challenging in the MITRE ATT&CK Navigator by default. You do need to go off and create per platform kind of coverage maps. And you also need to obviously provide feedback back to MITRE on unique attacks that you're seeing out there. For example, in the training yesterday, we noticed that malicious advertisements is not actually a technique. That's in the MITRE platform today, the attack kind of taxonomy today, and it's something that we're seeing on an almost daily basis. So definitely we encourage everyone to get involved and share what everyone's seeing. Also, we need to keep up to date. Threat intel is crucially important to help us evolve our threat detection research, prioritize all of our efforts as well. And so what's next for us? As I mentioned, custom MITRE techniques is something that we are focused on and starting to create. We're looking to share those back to the community as well. Much more log-focused coverage rather than just system. So looking at understanding what can we get from those logs, definitely generative AI and other opportunities there to understand what can we get out of log sources. I think that's very hard to understand today. What can you actually get from your logs? And then using that to derive log onboarding priority.